Resident Evil, also known as Biohazard, is a Japanese survival horror video game series and media franchise created by Capcom. Or at least that's how Resident Evil paints itself to be. But I will tell you one thing. Resident Evil is not a survival horror franchise at all. Although it does have some elements, at its core Resident Evil is not a survival horror franchise. Let's start with how Resident Evil came to be. The development of the first Resident Evil, released as Biohazard in Japan, began in 1993 when Capcom's Tokuro Fujiwara told Shinji Mikami and other co-workers to create a game using elements from Fujiwara's 1989 game Sweet Home. Now, for the newcomers, let's talk about Sweet Home. Sweet Home is based on the Japanese horror film of the same name and tells the story of a team of 5 filmmakers exploring an old mansion in search of precious frescoes hidden there. As they explore the mysterious mansion, they encounter hostile ghosts and other supernatural enemies. The player must navigate the intricately laid out mansion, battling with the enemies, and also a permadeath system to keep the player characters alive with the limited weapons and health restorative items available. And now I believe we have already drawn some similarities between the game and its inspiration. Now, let's see why Resident Evil is mistitled as horror survival. First aspect is the fact that you have the capacity of carrying guns and ammo. Second aspect would be the ability of refilling your health bar with healing items, herbs or spray. Third aspect is given by the utilization of non-playable characters. Here are included the walkers, infected dogs, lickers, and the presence of the bosses. Bosses such as Jan, William Birkin, Mr. X, and of course, Nemesis. At first glance these characters are fit in a survival horror environment. But you get to see why it's simply not true. Most of your enemies can easily go down in Resident Evil 1, 2 and 3. Now, let's talk about the boss characters. Could they be qualified as survival horror asset? Yes, they could. But this is where the survival aspect falls shortly. One main feature of these 3 games is the fact that sooner or later it forces you into boss battles. This is completely contradictory to survival horror. Avoiding combat is one constant element in any true survival horror series. Let's talk about exploration and puzzles. It's true that these two are present in the first 3 games. But this is just a mask. A method to make it seem like it's true survival horror, when it is not. From a technical perspective, you will find out the fact that puzzles and exploration simply do not work in Resident Evil. And why is that? It's the presence of numerous walkers and mutated animals. This completely breaks the pace of exploration and puzzle solving, and this gets even worse in Resident Evil 3, as Nemesis can run, shoot rockets at you, and rarely entering the save room. Don't get me wrong, I don't disagree with the concept of a pursuer in exploration. It's just that the exploration aspect is broken down by the fodder hostile characters. The more enemies you have in a game, the less the common sense to explore is, from a narrative perspective. Where the first Resident Evil games supposedly failed, Alien Isolation excelled. Just like in Resident Evil, you have the ability to carry weapons, refill your health bar. However, there is a punishment. If you choose to shoot down your hostiles, like other humans or Seegson androids, the alien will hear you and it can instantly kill you. This alone actually prevents you from shooting your enemies and take a more survival approach to the environment. However, this type of punishment is never present in the first 3 Resident Evil games. Other perfect examples of survival horror series are games such as Amnesia or Outlast, games where you are unarmed and have to avoid enemies at any cost. With that in mind, it is no wonder why Resident Evil as franchise became more and more action-focused throughout decades. Each Resident Evil game incorporated more and more action until that little survival aspect slowly faded away. When you take a look at all the Resident Evil games, there's a natural progression towards the action aspect. Why? Because this franchise has never been a true survival horror series, given, aforementioned, it forces you into boss battles. Resident Evil being focused directly more on action and linearity is the normal evolution because it wouldn't work otherwise with the technical aspects. So, when people blame Capcom for releasing video games such as Resident Evil 4, 5 and 6, in truth, they should look back at the release of the first Resident Evil game and realize it's not a true survival horror game either. To make things clear, I do not hate on Resident Evil games. I love them all equally. But once you start to analyze them all, you realize why this series progressed so much towards action through the passing of years. This video's only purpose is to help people understand why games such as Resident Evil 4 exist in this series. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe. And if you have any suggestions, please do let me know in the comment section.